Welcome to the World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I am a Rare New England Committee member and your host for today's show. Today, our show features Christina Hartman, who will be discussing the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases. Christina Hartman is a DC-based policy and advocacy expert with a background in building alliances. Christina is experienced in elevating the voices of patients, parents, scientists, and clinicians to have a positive impact on health and nutrition policy. Christina was attracted to the opportunity to build and lead an advocacy team at the EveryLife Foundation in Washington, D.C., based on her own experience with the Diagnostic Odyssey and journey with her youngest daughter, Charlotte. Christina currently serves as the Senior Director, Advocacy and Policy for the EveryLife Foundation. Welcome to the show, Christina. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, can you start us off by telling us about your experience and your daughter's experience with rare disease?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am very new to the rare disease community. I found out about the job at EveryLife following the foundation's move from Novato, California, where they'd been based for the past 9 years, to Washington, D.C. last year. And at the time, I was going through the Diagnostic Odyssey with my youngest daughter, Charlotte. Charlotte is now 2.5, but when she was a year old, the doctors were saying something's wrong. You know, she wasn't doing the normal things a child does. She wasn't able to sit up or crawl. They diagnosed her with a global developmental delay, and they didn't know why. So we had a whole slew of experts, some amazing physical therapists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, special educators. At the same time, we were very lucky to live a couple blocks from the NIH. They were able to check her out. They found that her muscles were fine. That had been one of the initial questions. You know, maybe something was wrong with her muscles. They were fine, so they thought it was probably a brain-body connection issue, but they didn't know what. The specialists at Children's, which also we were very lucky to live in the Washington, D.C. area, so went over to Children's National, had a neurologist, still have a neurologist, a geneticist, a whole slew of experts who were treating Charlotte, and they wanted to do some genetic tests. So we had an excellent platinum insurance plan through my husband's employer, and it was quite unfortunate. We never really had to use the plan before. We'd been lucky not to have too many health issues. And when the genetics department wanted to do a chromosomal microarray, it ended up being a several-month fight with the insurance company to get coverage. Finally got that test done and didn't tell us anything. So then the geneticist wanted to do a whole exome analysis. More months went by, still fighting them. At that point, we'd also had an MRI that showed mild delayed myelination of her nerve cells in her brain. Also, she had hypoplasia of the midline structure in her brain, so we knew that there was something wrong, but again, they still didn't know what. Finally, we gave up fighting with the insurance company, negotiated a self-pay price with the genetics company. Still haven't gotten the bill. Probably shouldn't tell you that. I'm sure I will eventually. And lo and behold, the whole exome results were definitive. And it turned out that Charlotte has a rare genetic disorder. There are less than 100 kids in the world that they know of with this disorder, but of course there are probably many more who are never diagnosed, because unless the kids are exhibiting a serious issue, they never pursue genetic testing. So we know at this point that Charlotte's condition is not degenerative, which was a huge load off our shoulders to finally have that answer. There will be a degree of intellectual disability that she will have. We don't know the extent of that. We can't know. She's only 2.5. But thankfully, I think in large part due to the really early and intense intervention that she had with the global delay, much of it was provided by the county, and she also had an amazing private physical therapist that had been recommended to us by our geneticist. And she saw this woman, Becky, twice a week for an hour for a year. And at 2.5, actually on New Year's Day, she was walking, which was just incredible. She's still not verbal. And the girls with her particular condition, which is called NAA10, N-alpha acetyltransferase. It's also known as Ogden in boys, and it's named after these boys in Ogden, Utah. There's huge variability in terms of the outcomes. So the boys typically die in infancy and early childhood because it's an X-linked disorder, and it's in Charlotte's case, it's de novo. It was one base that was switched that changed the amino acid that was produced, an amino acid that, in this N-alpha acetyltransferase chain was important. And so they still don't know. They're trying to do the basic research, get the natural history. We have a researcher, Golson Lyon, who is trying to get a grant from the NIH. He's applied 18 times. His 19th attempt is taking place actually next month. So we're all very hopeful that that will work. They know that there are probably implications for this disorder for Parkinson's, Huntington's, and other neurological diseases. So the hope is that if they can get funding and understand what's going on with these kids, that will then have a positive impact for further disease research. But with the girls, many of them are wheelchair bound, many of them are nonverbal, but then there are some like my daughter, and again, I think in large part due to that early and intense intervention that I'm told will probably be at the top of their range. And again, the range is quite variable. Many of the girls have comorbidities. There are a lot of cardiomyopathies, there are renal complications, there are seizures. They don't know exactly why the girls have this. And again, it varies from child to child. We were recently cleared by cardiology. We did the renal scan. We'll have to see about the seizures. Again, she's still quite young, and as we know, seizures across the board in many rare disorders are a problem. They're degenerative in themselves, which is not great, but lots of work, remains to be done, lots more to figure out, but we were just very lucky to get a diagnosis. I know that the average time for diagnosis in our community is 5 to 7 years, which I think is just unacceptable in this day and age. Many of the parents and children that I work with, they have degenerative diseases, so timeliness is critical. And one of the issues with all these new therapies coming online, even the ones that are potentially curative, is they can fix problems going forward, but they can't go back and solve the damage that's already been done. So we have a long way to go.
Right. Wow, what a journey. And it really is amazing to think how fortunate you are living where you are to get some of these answers, and what work you and your family had to go through to do that. So kudos to you for that. I think she's a very lucky girl. Wow. So yes, that is a lot. I wanted to ask you, and I think I can probably guess why, but can you articulate a bit why you came to work in the rare disease world? And I have already seen your passion, but EveryLife Foundation clearly is very lucky to have you, so I'd love to hear a little bit about how that transition worked.
Yes, and I think I'm lucky to be there. I mean, it's an incredible community of people, the entire rare disease community, and EveryLife in particular. So I was thrilled to find out that this already exists. I know that many of the initial pioneers, they created this, Abby Myers, Mark Dant, all these folks who have been in the field for decades. And it's thanks to them that people like myself can walk in and already have, the opportunity to really keep the ball rolling and make a difference. But I came to EveryLife because of Charlotte. I mean, that was really what drew me to the organization. I'd worked in the DC metro area for 20 years. I went to undergrad and grad school there, entered the federal government right after graduate school, spent 1 year down at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, and then quickly transferred back to Washington to the Office of the Secretary for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, a lot of the agencies that I think the general public is more familiar with. So spent about 6 years there, then went to various nonprofits, spent some time in industry, have lobbied on behalf of the beer industry, the cardiologists, others. And now I'm thrilled to be able to take my policy and advocacy expertise to EveryLife and really further the rare disease community's policy agenda.
Great. What exactly is your role at the organization? And can you tell me a little bit about what you do day to day?
Absolutely. So I was hired last summer in June of 2018 to build and lead the policy and advocacy team. And that was following the foundation's move to Washington, D.C. So the foundation previously had done a ton of policy and advocacy work, but from their space in Novato, California, which was quite different when they were trying to fly into DC, manage consultants, and really work that way, which a lot of organizations do. But over time, typically, if you really want to have a footprint in Washington and move an agenda forward, you really have to have some real estate there. So our executive director, Julia Jenkins, who has been with the foundation for a decade, its entire existence at this point, she had this incredible vision to create a rare hub in Washington, D.C. So not just an office for the EveryLife Foundation, but a hub where rare disease organizations, many of which have very limited resources, could come together and have that real estate in Washington, D.C. So in November of 2018, we opened our doors, and the Rare Hub consists of the EveryLife staff that's based in Washington, D.C., and the headquarters of the foundation now. We also have the Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy folks in the office, the PKD Foundation, and then Fragile X. We do still have one more office open, so we are searching for another Rare Hub partner in our current suite. And there is a wall that we can knock down if we find 3 or 4 more partners, so we can actually expand the space. So we're very excited about having that real estate in Washington, D.C. It allows us to really collaborate. It allows us to get over to Capitol Hill quickly, get over to all the administrative agencies and the executive branch quickly, get over to the White House. We're just blocks away. So really having that physical space, it makes a crucial difference in our visibility and our proximity to be able to interact with policymakers.
Right. So I know that EveryLife, because as part of an advocacy organization, you work with patient organizations often. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Absolutely. So you'd ask me kind of on a day-to-day basis, what it is that we do. So most of my time is spent engaging with external partners, not just the policymakers, but also the patient advocates and the leaders of the patient advocacy organizations. So EveryLife is one of 3 major national nonprofits here in the United States focused on all rare diseases. So you're probably already familiar with NORD. They've been around for 35 years, Global Genes based in California, and then EveryLife, which I think is unique in that we are a bit smaller, we're nimble, and very focused. So we'll talk later, I think, about our very focused policy agenda. But there are a few ways that we engage the patient community that I think are very unique. The first one is our Rare Disease Legislative Advocates program. And that's a program where we get the entire rare disease community together and we ask them, what are your priorities? And how do we further those priorities legislatively? So we have monthly webinars, and we've been growing so fast that our room itself, people will come in person if they're in the Washington, D.C. area. We're pretty much at capacity, so I think we're going to have to find a bigger room. Our webinars, which many people join the same meeting by webinar, are also at capacity. I think WebEx has been maxing out at 200 people, so we're also looking at, what new technology we need to get to allow even more advocates to call in. But what we do is we invite people from different organizations that have information they want to share with the rare disease community. For example, the sickle cell community will often come onto the call and talk about their legislation and how that's moving forward. There are a lot of conversations happening about value-based payments for, new potentially curative therapies, including gene therapies. There's a lot of updates on the calls about how that's going and what the implications are for the patient community and the rare disease community. We also had an update from the FDA on our last call. They're having a patient day at the FDA in late April. So Janet Maynard, who is running that office, temporarily got on the call and spoke directly to the rare disease advocates about that. We also do a monthly newsletter. People will submit information, different patient organizations, and that will go out to the entire community, thousands of people. And then, of course, the one I think you joined us for this past February, our biggest event of the year, is the Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. And this year was our biggest year ever. I believe it was our 6th or 7th year doing this fly-in. We had over 800 advocates that participated in at least one of the events we held during that week. And we had almost 300, or I think it was over 300 individual Hill visits with members of Congress. So we reached almost every member of Congress this time around. We plan next year to make sure we hit every single district. So we are recruiting patient advocates in particular from those districts where we don't currently have anyone, to make sure that we have complete reach across the entire United States. We also have a rare giving program that provides partial scholarships to advocates who want to attend Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. They're partial, so it's about $500 that offsets the cost of traveling to Washington, D.C. We typically grant those to people who are new, who have not yet been to Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill, and we divide them up so that we make sure we cover, again, every district in every state in the U.S. And then we follow those up with what's been known as our in-district lobby days. That happens every August when members of Congress are in their home districts. We are rebranding the program this year, so it's going to be Rare Across America. So that's what's been known as those in-district lobby days. But it's very unique because it's a second touch that we have in a single year. We've got the fly-in. Most people do that in Washington, most groups, but they don't do that follow-up in August when the members are in district. And I think it's very powerful for them to hear from constituents not only coming to Washington, D.C., but then following up with them in their districts at home.
Right. Wow, so there is definitely a lot that happens for patients. I know there's a lot of programs that EveryLife does, and I've been very fortunate to be able to have a piece in a few of these. So I'd love for you to elaborate just a little bit more on some of the programs that exist. You've touched on some, but I know there's some
there are
additional.
so many.
There are so many.
Yeah, so our membership program, which is another big one, is the Community Congress. And this is also very unique with EveryLife. Many organizations have corporate councils where industry members will pay a fee and, work with the organization a bit. EveryLife decided that we would try to find a way to work even more collaboratively with industry and with patient groups when there's an opportunity to really move the ball forward for patients. So our Community Congress is a membership program where industry members pay to join and patient organizations, the heads of patient organizations, join for free. And the policy agenda for the Community Congress is basically we take the EveryLife Foundation policy priorities, which are set by our board of directors, and then we take the industry priorities and we see where do those intersect. And so obviously we don't agree on everything, and those we do separately, but where there is an opportunity to collaborate, we move forward together. So we have 3 working groups, public policy, regulatory, and newborn screening. Our public policy working group has a very exciting initiative that we're pursuing this year. I am personally thrilled about this. It's a burden study. So no one has really to date characterized the true burden of rare disease in the United States, the comprehensive economic and societal burden, not just what payers are, paying for treatment, but what is the cost to families serving as caregivers? What's the cost of parents who are out of work? What's the cost to society when someone doesn't have a therapy or a cure and then can't participate as effectively as they otherwise would? We believe that the cost of treating disease will be shown to be far less than not investing in treatments and therapies. So that's what we hope to demonstrate. We're starting out, we received funding for a pilot study that the Lewin Group is going to do. The Lewin Group did an excellent similar study for Alzheimer's, and so now they're going to do this one focused on rare disease. And we're starting with 5 ICD-10 codes for this pilot study, and going to look at the initial burden. They are going to do it using payer data from both private payers and a Medicare database. They're also going to do a literature review. And so this preliminary analysis will be complete this year. At the same time, this Community Congress Public Policy Working Group is requesting of the United States Congress an appropriation for $1.5 million that would go to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And this would be to commission a comprehensive study of the entire burden of disease, of rare disease, by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And this is something we've already been in conversations with the National Academies about. They are very excited. In fact, they are participating in the pilot study as well to make sure that it really lays the groundwork for something even greater. But we think that this is something the rare disease community really needs, because if we can't demonstrate the public health crisis that we all know exists, but we need to demonstrate it for policymakers, make sure they understand the true magnitude, and that's how we'll get the policies and that's how we'll get the resources that we really need to fix this problem.
Yes, that sounds like an amazing plan, and wow, a big one.
Yeah.
And I think something else to talk about that I have learned as a rare disease patient is the unique piece of rare disease. There's a lot of hashtags, you know, together we are better, together we are stronger.
Yes.
Can you touch upon that just for the viewer, because it's not something that everybody fully understands?
Absolutely. So from my perspective as someone in Washington, we are all constantly competing for the attention of policymakers. I mean, people in Washington, if you go to visit, you've been there, you've lived there, everybody's going 100 miles an hour. Everyone has this amazing set of priorities that are so important. Now, for me, rare disease is paramount, but for my member of Congress, it's probably not. So I have to find a way to convince that member, to convince the staff, to convince, you know, the White House, et cetera, that this should be an area that they focus on. So the only way I've ever seen that done effectively is when groups, multiple groups that focus on a single issue come together. We've seen this in the cardiovascular disease community. You know, I used to work for the American College of Cardiology, and we worked a lot with the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association really was more of the grassroots group that represented Americans, and the American College of Cardiology was really representing the cardiologists themselves, the 53,000 cardiologists in America. And when we came together as a cardiovascular disease community, we could really impact policy. The White House would call and want to know, what does the cardiovascular disease community think about something? When we were divided, when our leadership of our organizations was not on the same page, we were not as effective. No one at the White House would move forward if they couldn't see alignment within the cardiovascular disease community. So I think it's the same thing for the rare disease community. We are absolutely stronger if we are united, and if the leadership of all of our major organizations is on the same page and speaking with one voice on behalf of the rare disease community.
Right. I know it's been amazing for me to find out that while every disease is different in 100 and, you know, maybe 1,000 or the different numbers, but again, together, we're a united group.
Yes.
and have the same overall issues.
And we're impossible to ignore.
Exactly.
I mean, it's an estimated 30 million people, and it's
Right.
probably right on the money with that estimate.
Right. Well, thank you so much for all your insight. Before closing, we would like to provide our viewers with an opportunity to share comments or ask questions from our prior shows. Rare New England in Motion is the perfect way to expand upon our mission of engaging with our community. Please send us your questions, comments to info@rarenewengland.org. We will share your responses on the next show. From our last show, we received a question from a viewer about the Huntington's Organization for Young People. We would like to guide you to the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization at hdyo.org. Here you can learn more about the organization that Seth Rotberg mentioned for young adults relating to Huntington's disease. Thank you for your inquiry. I would like to say a great big thank you to Christina for being here today. She flew in from DC, so it's very exciting to have somebody with such expertise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. That's all for our show. Please let us know your comments about the show or email us any questions you have about today's topic. From all of us here at Rare New England and all the patients and families who keep rare disease in motion, thank you for watching. And remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think zebras. Thank you.